She thought it would be the perfect escape, a peaceful break from the noise, the pressure, the fast-paced routine that had left her feeling emotionally drained. It wasn't just about the destination. It was about reconnecting with someone she loved, a man she believed she knew better than anyone. To her friends, the trip seemed like a sweet, spontaneous getaway. But in truth, she'd been planning it for weeks, searching for the right spot, making sure the timing was just right. She packed light, took time off work, and told her mom she couldn't wait to just breathe again. That phrase would echo like a ghost in the weeks to come. From the outside, their relationship seemed ordinary. Affectionate texts, shared photos, and weekends spent together. But those closest to her had noticed subtle cracks. She had changed. There were quiet moments on the phone when her voice sounded distant. Uncertainty lingered beneath her smile. Still, she brushed it off, telling herself, and everyone else, that it was just stress. Maybe this trip would help. Maybe they just needed time away from distractions, space to fall in love again. So, when they left for the coast, driving several hours to a remote, picturesque resort tucked between cliffs and ocean, it felt like a reset. She even posted a story that first night, 2 wine glasses, sunset behind them, captioned, "Finally exhaling." That would be her last post. Then, just 36 hours after arriving, she was gone. Disappeared without a word, a call, a trace. No one saw her leave. No security cameras caught her exit. No screams. No struggle. It was as if she vanished into the thin, salty air. The man she traveled with, the boyfriend who once promised to protect her, came back from a walk alone. Disheveled, blank-faced. He waited hours before saying anything. When asked where she was, he simply said, "She got ahead of me. I lost her on the trail." But that story would quickly begin to crumble, because the trail they supposedly walked was steep, treacherous, and rarely used by tourists. There were no signs of an accident. No screams reported. No lost belongings. No sign she'd ever been there at all. And more chilling, when police reviewed his digital footprint, they discovered a series of deleted messages, gaps in his GPS timeline, and an eerie pattern of behavior that painted a far darker picture. Suddenly, the romantic escape began to look like something else entirely. The pieces didn't fit. His reactions were too calm. Her disappearance too convenient. And slowly, those who knew her best began to ask the same horrifying question. Was this trip ever meant to be a vacation? Or had it always been a setup? In the days that followed, her name would be plastered across headlines, her face shared on missing posters and social media. Her family would beg for answers. Her friends would search the cliffs, and the man who was supposed to come home with her would return alone, refusing to speak. The getaway that was meant to save their relationship may have been the moment it was destroyed, not by heartbreak, but by betrayal, by violence, and by a truth so dark it still hasn't fully come to light. This wasn't just a disappearance. It was the kind of nightmare you read about but never imagined happening to someone you know. A trip that began with love, promises, and laughter, but ended in silence, suspicion, and a terrifying realization. Sometimes the person you trust most, the one who holds your hand, may also be the one holding the secret to your end. At the heart of this tragedy is a couple who, on the surface, seemed to have everything going for them. She was radiant, the kind of person who lit up a room without trying, smart, warm, loved by her friends, and fiercely loyal to the people she cared about. She was close to her family, called her mother every day, and had a knack for making people feel safe in her presence. To most, she seemed grounded, centered. But those closest to her had noticed subtle changes in the months before her trip, a growing tension in her voice, a quiet hesitation in the way she talked about her relationship. Still, when she spoke about the man she was dating, there was always a mixture of love and uncertainty in her words. She believed in second chances. She believed people could change. He, on the other hand, was harder to read. To strangers, he was charming, attentive, polite, the kind of man who knew how to say the right thing at the right time. He came off as steady, maybe even a little reserved, But behind that calm surface was something else. He had a temper, but only in private. He could go quiet for days, disappear emotionally when things didn't go his way. Some of her friends had their doubts. One even described him as emotionally slippery, never outright abusive, but always keeping control, always finding subtle ways to isolate her from others. Still, she stayed. Maybe because she loved him. Maybe because she wanted to believe he could be better. Or maybe because it was easier to hope than to start over again. They had been together for just over a year when they booked the trip. The timing, at first glance, felt spontaneous. But beneath the surface, there were signs of deeper fractures. There had been arguments in recent weeks, distance, misunderstandings. She had even stayed with a friend for a few days after one particularly intense disagreement, and yet she told no one about what exactly happened between them. She kept it vague, just needed space, and then suddenly she was back with him, smiling again, saying they were going to get away and figure things out. The destination was carefully chosen, remote enough to avoid the chaos of city life, but private enough to feel like a retreat. A few days by the sea, just the two of them, no distractions, no friends, no family, no cell service for miles. She saw it as a reset button, a romantic escape to rekindle what had started to fade. A test, perhaps, to see if the man she fell in love with still existed beneath the strain and silence. She wanted to believe he did. She needed to believe he did, because she had already invested her heart in him. And like so many women before her, she believed that if she just loved him a little more, if she just gave it one more chance, maybe everything would fall into place. So when she left with hope. She left with a suitcase full of carefully packed outfits, books she planned to read by the sea, and a heart cautiously optimistic. She texted her sister on the drive there, a short message that read, "Fresh start, wish me luck." It was the kind of message that didn't sound like a goodbye. It sounded like someone who wanted to believe in beginnings. But as we now know, it would be the beginning of something far more devastating. The place they chose looked like something out of a travel brochure. Blue skies melting into turquoise waves, cliffs that dropped dramatically into the ocean, and a resort so tucked away it felt like the edge of the earth. From the outside, it was perfect. A few scattered villas with private balconies, hammocks hanging between palm trees, and long, winding trails that snaked along the coast. It was the kind of place designed for lovers, quiet, secluded, romantic. But behind that postcard perfection was a silence that felt a little too deep, a little too isolating. And for someone like her, alone with a man she was starting to feel unsure of, that silence may have been more suffocating than soothing. The resort itself was small, boutique style. It marketed itself as an eco-luxury experience, which meant minimal staff, solar-powered lighting, and rooms built to blend in with the environment. There were no CCTV cameras, no front desk open after sundown, cell service was nearly non-existent, and Wi-Fi was limited to a single hotspot near the cafe, a detail that didn't seem important until later, when investigators tried to piece together a timeline of that fateful weekend. Each villa sat yards apart, hidden by palm trees and thick tropical foliage. Guests rarely crossed paths, unless they made an effort. It was the kind of place you chose when you wanted to disappear for it. Oh wow. And in her case, that's exactly what happened, though not in the way anyone expected. They arrived just after sunset on a Thursday. Staff recalled them checking in with smiles, hand in hand, tired from the drive, but excited to settle in. She carried a small bag with her books, sunglasses, and a Polaroid camera she'd started using again. He brought a backpack and a hardshell suitcase, heavier than expected. The two had dinner at the resort's restaurant that night, grilled fish, white wine, and a view of the moon reflecting off the water. Everything about it looked normal, but when asked later, the waitress remembered something strange. He spoke. For her? Ordered for both. She didn't say much, just nodded, smiled, looked distant. The next morning, she posted a photo on her story. It showed her feet in the sand, coffee in hand, and a caption that simply read, "Exactly what I needed." But something about that post unsettled her sister. She messaged back, "You okay? You look tired." There was no reply. Hours later, her phone would go silent. Behind the breathtaking scenery, there were signs of something darker. Trails leading out from the resort were barely marked, just thin dirt paths surrounded by thick brush and rocky terrain. One, in particular, wound up toward a cliff that offered stunning views of the ocean below. It was a popular photo spot, but dangerous. Locals had warned guests not to go alone. And yet, that trail would later become the center of the investigation. The place where footprints were found. The place where her scent was last picked up. The place where something no one is quite sure what went terribly wrong. For her, the destination was meant to be a sanctuary, a place to reset, to breathe, to fall back in love. But instead, it became a final backdrop, a haunting canvas that held more questions than answers. The beauty of the place, its calm, its stillness, its detachment from the rest of the world, may have been the very thing that allowed a nightmare to unfold unnoticed. And somewhere along those cliffs, beneath the cover of waves and wind, whatever happened that day has remained hidden, buried not just by nature, but by someone who didn't want it to be found. The morning of her disappearance was, by most accounts, uneventful.com. Almost deceptively peaceful. It was the second full day of their trip, the day they'd planned to explore. According to resort staff, the couple came down for breakfast. Just after 8 a.m., she wore a light sundress and hiking shoes, her hair pulled back casually. He was quiet, as usual, speaking for both of them. They sat on the open terrace, overlooking the sea. She smiled at the waiter, ordered fruit and coffee. Nothing seemed out of place until you looked closer. She didn't touch her food. She kept glancing out toward the trees. And when the staff member returned to refill her drink, she flinched at the sound behind her. Tiny cracks in the image of a perfect morning. Shortly after breakfast, they returned to their villa to change. He told police they were going to hike a nearby trail, a steep path that curved up into the cliffs behind the resort. A staff member saw them leave. She waved as they walked past the garden area, her camera in one hand and a water bottle in the other. That was the last time anyone would ever see her. From that moment, there's no concrete timeline, no security footage, no trail cameras. Just his account, which changed more than once. In his first statement, he claimed they walked the trail together until she stopped to take photos. He said she told him to go ahead and that she'd catch up. But later, he said she walked ahead, while he tied his shoe, and when he looked up, she was gone. The inconsistencies raised eyebrows, but the lack of evidence made it hard to challenge him, at least at first. What is known is that he returned to the resort alone, and not right away. Hours passed. He didn't come rushing down the trail. He didn't shout for help. He didn't alert anyone. In fact, he returned to the villa, showered, changed clothes, and spent nearly 40 minutes in the room before going to the front desk. The staff member on duty remembers his demeanor.com, dry and oddly relaxed. He told them she'd wandered. Often he couldn't find her, that she must have taken a wrong turn. But he wasn't panicked. He wasn't worried. If anything, he seemed annoyed, like she'd inconvenienced him somehow. When the resort contacted local authorities, they responded quickly. The area, while remote, had hosted missing hikers before. A search team arrived by late afternoon, and the forest was scanned by drones and tracking dogs. But they found nothing. No footprints. No discarded items, no trail of panic or distress. Her phone was turned off. Her camera was gone. It was as if she had been erased. What made it more disturbing was how he reacted when the search began. He didn't join the search parties. He stayed inside the villa, claiming he was too exhausted. When offered a chance to retrace the trail with police, he declined. "I've done enough," he said. Those words would haunt investigators for weeks. And still, through it all, her family hadn't been notified. Her mother found out the next morning, not from him, not from the police, but from a local news article online. She called his phone. No answer. Texted? No reply. The silence was deafening. For the people who loved her most. That day marked the beginning of a nightmare. Not just because she was gone, but because no one, not even the man who claimed to love her, seemed to be looking for her. Asterisk. From the very beginning, the boyfriend's story didn't quite sit right. At first, it was easy to dismiss the small inconsistencies. He was in shock, confused, maybe even traumatized. But as investigators began to dig deeper, the cracks turned into fractures. His timeline, the one he offered so confidently, began to fall apart under even the lightest scrutiny. He told authorities that they began their hike around 9:30 a.m., walked together for 20 minutes, and then she wandered off ahead of him. He claimed he lost sight of her, called her name for an hour, and then went back to the villa when he couldn't find her. But when police checked the resort's smart gate logs and timestamps from the only trail camera on the main entrance path, the data didn't align. His phone pinged in the villa area nearly 45 minutes earlier than he claimed he returned. Worse still, GPS data showed that he never even walked the full length of the trail. He barely got halfway up before doubling back. There was no evidence he had searched for her at all. When asked why he waited so long to raise the alarm, his answer was cold and clinical. I thought she was playing a game, he said. Maybe trying to scare me? But her family knew better. She wasn't the type to play games in an unfamiliar forest. She had a deep fear of getting lost. And even if she had gotten disoriented, she wouldn't have ignored calls or text messages. But then came another problem. There were no calls. He hadn't attempted to call her once during the time he claimed she was missing. Not a single dial-out from his phone. When confronted with that, he said he panicked and forgot. Investigators weren't convinced. Then came the digital trail. Forensics teams recovered deleted files from his phone and laptop. Buried beneath layers of cleared browser history were search terms that chilled investigators. How to survive a police interrogation? How long before a body decomposes in salt water? Does deleting GPS data really work? Some of the searches dated back weeks before the trip, suggesting that whatever happened may not have been a tragic accident, but something far more deliberate. And then there were the messages. Texts between him and a friend showed him venting about the relationship, calling her paranoid, controlling, and a dead weight. In one message, he wrote, "One way or another, I need out." That message was sent 5 days before the trip. Authorities kept their findings quiet at first. There was no body, no eyewitnesses, and legally, not enough to make an arrest. But behind the scenes, their doubts were growing. His timeline was not only suspicious, it was unraveling. The man who once stood before them as a distressed boyfriend began to look more like a carefully rehearsed actor, reciting a script designed to hide the truth. And still, in every interview, he stuck to his story. She walked ahead. He lost her. That's all he knew. His face stayed calm. His voice never wavered, but his eyes told a different story. Not of fear, not of sadness, but of calculation. And for investigators, it was becoming increasingly clear. They weren't dealing with a man grieving a loss. They were dealing with a man managing a lie. Asterisk. Asterisk, when the call finally came in that a woman had gone missing on the trail, local authorities responded quickly, but with cautious optimism. Disappearances in remote areas weren't unheard of. Most turned out to be cases of hikers taking the wrong paths or underestimating terrain, but something about this one felt different. From the moment they arrived at the resort and began asking questions, the tension in the air was undeniable. The staff were nervous, guests were whispering, and the boyfriend, the one who should have been frantic, remained composed. Too composed. The first few hours of the search focused on the immediate area, the trail, the surrounding brush, the base of the cliffs. Search dogs were brought in, their handlers scanning the air for any trace of her scent. A local ranger, experienced with missing persons in the area, noted how quiet the trail was that day. No echoes, no birds, just wind and waves and something colder that he couldn't quite name. As the search widened, drones took to the sky, mapping the jagged coastline and dense foliage that could easily swallow someone whole. But even with advanced infrared scanning and ground teams combing the brush inch by inch, there was nothing. No clothing, no footprints, no backpack, no broken branches. It was as if she'd never set foot on the trail at all. Yet, despite the mounting concern, the boyfriend didn't seem eager to help. He stayed back at the villa, citing exhaustion and emotional shock. When officers asked if he'd be willing to walk them through where he last saw her, he declined. "I'd rather not," he said. He offered no further explanation. Instead of pacing or joining the search parties, he sat on the porch, sipping water, scrolling his phone. One officer later remarked, "He looked like he was waiting for an Uber, not a body." By the second day, the search volunteers from the local town joined in, scouring ravines and checking caves along the cliffside. Her family, now alerted and devastated, arrived and began their own desperate search. Her mother walked the trail barefoot, screaming her daughter's name into the trees. Her father questioned guests, held up printed photos, and begged them to remember anything, even something as simple as a glance. Still, the forest gave nothing back. A few days later, cadaver dogs picked up a faint scent trail near the northern cliff, a jagged drop-off, notorious footing, but when a technical rope team descended the rocks, they found no signs of a fall. No blood. No torn fabric. No body. The scent simply stopped, as if she had vanished into air. What made it more chilling was the growing realization among the search teams. They weren't just looking for someone who got lost. They were looking for someone who might never have been meant to be found. Back at the resort, investigators began to question the staff more closely. Several employees recalled something they hadn't reported earlier. The boyfriend had been seen walking back alone much earlier than he claimed. One even noticed him carrying something under his jacket. When asked what it was, he brushed it off. "Just some towels," he said. But as the hours turned into days, and the days into weeks, that vague statement began to gnaw at everyone involved. Because if she didn't fall, if she didn't run, and if she didn't simply get lost, then what happened on that trail? By the end of the first week, the official search was scaled back. The terrain was too difficult, the risk too high. But for her family, the search would never stop. And for the investigators who had begun to suspect the worst, one haunting fact remained. The forest hadn't swallowed her. Someone had taken her, or done something far worse, and left no trace. 4 days. Investigators combed through brush, questioned witnesses, and analyzed every inch of the trail, but found nothing. At least, nothing physical. But it wasn't the cliffs, the ocean, or even the trees that would eventually start to reveal what really happened. It was data, hidden beneath keystrokes, cloud backups, and deleted history. The kind of digital trail most people forget even exists, and what investigators uncovered there would shift the tone of the case entirely. This was no longer just a missing person. This was the beginning of something much darker, a potential cover meticulously constructed and now slowly unraveling. The first break came from the boyfriend's phone. He had voluntarily handed it over, a move investigators initially took as a sign of cooperation. But their forensic analysts found that a significant number of files had been deleted the same day she disappeared. Search histories wiped clean. Messaging apps scrubbed, GPS records tampered with. That alone raised red flags, but it was what they managed to recover from backup servers that sent a chill through the room. One search stood out. How long does it take for a body to sink in the ocean? Another, remote cliff trails with no cameras. The searches weren't days old. They were weeks old, before the trip was even booked. In fact, one query dated back to a full month before they left. Can deleted GPS history be recovered by police? It was a question he now knew the answer to. Too late. Then came the photos. Buried in his cloud storage were images taken days before the trip, one of her sleeping, another of her suitcase half in isolation. They didn't say much, but when placed against the timeline, They seemed more like documentation than memories, more like preparation than affection. Investigators then moved to his laptop, where a deeper layer of activity emerged. He had browsed forums on legal loopholes related to missing persons. He'd downloaded a document titled Survival Guide for Interrogations, and in his email trash folder, a message draft was found unsent, addressed to a friend with a subject line that simply read, "If anything happens." Its contents were vague, but included the phrase, "Some things are better buried." Even more disturbing were the location pings. The resort was located several miles from a known cliffside lookout, a dangerous, poorly fenced area not promoted to guests due to safety concerns. Despite this, his GPS records showed he had made a solo visit to that location the evening before her disappearance. No photo, no check-in, just a quiet detour off the beaten path, completely unexplained. Authorities also tracked down security footage from a fuel station 40 minutes from the resort. The footage showed him stopping alone, early in the morning, hours before sunrise, on the day she vanished. He claimed he'd never left the villa that morning until they went hiking together. But there he was, alone, in the dark, filling up a small red fuel canister. For what? He never explained. The deeper they dug, the more contradictions surfaced. And yet, through all of it, he maintained his innocence. Calm, composed. His statements remained consistent, or rather, consistently vague. He still claimed she had gone ahead, that he lost her, that he searched, panicked, and returned. Nothing more. He deflected every inconsistency as misunderstood timing or bad memory. But memory couldn't explain Google searches made weeks in advance. Memory couldn't erase the GPS record of his quiet detour, and memory couldn't justify the eerie coldness with which he described the last moments he ever saw her. By now, the case had captured national attention. The media called it the vanishing on the cliff. Talk shows debated his guilt. True crime forums exploded with timelines, maps, and theories. And her family, shattered but determined, demanded answers. They believed what police were now quietly beginning to suspect. This wasn't a tragic accident, it was something planned, something practiced, something executed, and then buried, both literally and digitally. As investigators quietly gathered damning digital evidence and the boyfriend remained disturbingly calm, her family's world was crumbling. What began as confusion quickly turned into dread. Her mother couldn't sleep. Her father checked his phone every hour, praying for any update. Her younger sister clung to hope, hoping this was all some terrible mistake. But deep down, they all knew. She wouldn't just leave. She wouldn't vanish, without a word, without a message, without calling home. She was close to her family, the kind of woman who texted her mom good morning almost every day, and called her sister just to talk about what she was cooking for dinner. She didn't disappear silently. She didn't believe in running away. The idea that she would go off trail and vanish without reaching out to anyone, was unthinkable. To those who truly knew her, that silence wasn't just out of character. It was terrifying. Her mother held a press conference just 4 days after the official search began. Standing in front of flashing cameras, trembling, her voice cracked as she begged for answers. She is not the kind of person who would just walk away. Something has happened, and we deserve to know what. The heartbreak in her voice pierced through the media coverage. People across the country began to pay attention, not because of sensationalism, but because of the raw, unmistakable pain in a mother's eyes. Her sister took to social media, flooding every platform with her photo and a desperate message. Please, help us find her. Please don't stop sharing her face. And the internet listened. Thousands of users reposted her story. Hashtags spread. News channels picked up the emotional angle. She wasn't just a missing woman anymore. She was someone's daughter, someone's best friend, someone's whole world. As time passed, more personal details began to emerge, not just about the trip, but about her relationship. Close friends came forward. One recalled a conversation just weeks before the vacation. She had confided in her that things weren't as good as they looked, that he had become cold. Controlling? That she felt small around him? that she wasn't sure she could keep doing it. And yet, like so many, she had stayed believing in change, in reconciliation, in second chances. That's what made it all so much worse. Her family wasn't just grieving her loss, they were grieving the truth they had ignored. The uneasy looks, the subtle comments, the way her light had dimmed in the last few months. And now, with every unanswered question, they were left, wondering whether they had missed the signs, whether they could have done something before it was too late. Her father spoke publicly, only once, at a candlelight vigil held in their hometown, holding a photo of her as a child, smiling, full of life. He simply said, "She trusted the wrong person, and now she's gone." His voice didn't rise. It didn't break. It was quiet, steady, and full of a pain that no words could ever truly express. The media began to shift their narrative, no longer framing her disappearance as a mystery, but as a probable tragedy. Headlines read, "Vanished woman's family demands justice," "Romantic getaway ends in disappearance," and "Silenced from boyfriend fuels speculation." But her family didn't care about the coverage. They cared about the truth. They kept calling the police, pushing, posting, speaking to anyone who would listen, because they knew, as surely as they knew their own names, that she hadn't just walked away from her life. Something had happened to her. And the man who returned from that trip alone knew exactly what it was. Weeks passed. Then months. The official investigation stalled, not because the authorities stopped believing something sinister had happened, but because the one thing they needed most remained missing. Her. No body. No undeniable trace. No physical evidence tying the boyfriend to a crime scene. Legally, there was nothing to hold him with. Nothing to charge him on. Without her remains, there would be no trial, no conviction, and possibly no justice. Despite growing public pressure, law enforcement had to face the brutal reality. They were at a standstill, with no witnesses, no confession, and no hard forensic evidence. The case drifted into that haunting limbo all too familiar in missing persons investigations, cold, but not closed, quiet, but not forgotten. But while police files gathered dust, the internet caught fire. True crime communities across Reddit, YouTube, and TikTok exploded with theories, timelines, drone footage, breakdowns, and screen grabs from press conferences. Amateur sleuths began assembling digital maps, analyzing GPS data released in court filings, even contacting local businesses near the resort for camera footage that might have been overlooked. They found inconsistencies. They flagged statements he'd made early on that later changed. And they found a pattern, an unsettling one, that suggested this wasn't spontaneous. It was planned. Podcasts picked up the story. Influencers with millions of followers started sharing her face, her name, and the haunting circumstances of her disappearance. Some podcasts even brought in former FBI profilers, body language experts, and forensic psychologists to dissect his interviews. Their conclusions weren't legally binding, but they were powerful. Public opinion shifted rapidly. He wasn't just a person of interest anymore. He was the main suspect in the court of public opinion. He, meanwhile, went silent, deleted social media, moved to another city, changed his number, and yet he couldn't outrun the storm. Internet sleuths tracked his whereabouts. Some posted videos of him being spotted in supermarkets, filmed walking alone, wearing sunglasses and a hat, trying to disappear in plain sight. One video, viewed over 2 million times, showed him leaving a lawyer's office, his head down, refusing to answer questions. The comments section below that video read like a chorus, "Guilty, coward. Where is she?" And still, through all of this, her family continued their fight. They organized search parties, held public rallies, and launched a nonprofit foundation in her name to aid other families of missing women. Her mother appeared on national television, demanding renewed investigation. Her sister posted weekly updates, never letting the story fade. They refused to let her name be reduced to a hashtag or a cold file. She was more than that. She was their daughter, their sister, their everything. In the background, law enforcement quietly reopened certain elements of the case. They began re-interviewing witnesses, following up on new digital leads submitted by online users, reprocessing items recovered from the boyfriend's home. Though no arrest was made, something had shifted. The silence was cracking. The pressure was building. Because even if the justice system had stalled, the internet never sleeps. And when the official search faded into the background, thousands of strangers picked up the torch. One post at a time. One theory at a time. One name repeated over and over again. Hers. In the end, when all the interviews were done, the timelines picked apart, and the trails had long gone cold. Only one question remained, one that haunted everyone involved, from investigators to her family to the thousands of strangers who followed her story with heartbreak and outrage. Where is she? What really happened on that cliffside? Was there a moment of rage? A planned act carried out in chilling silence? Or something else entirely? Something no one could have imagined. Her case, like so many others, now floats in that unbearable space between truth and speculation. No trial, no conviction, no closure. Just silence, heavy, echoing silence. The kind that lingers in phone calls that go unanswered, in birthdays that come and go without her, in the empty seat at the dinner table where she should still be laughing, talking, living. Her family clings to the hope that one day something will break, that a new witness will come forward, that a mistake will be made, that the man they believe took her will finally be forced to answer. But what if he never does? What if the truth is locked forever in a place no one will find, a shallow grave hidden beneath nature's cover? A weighted secret left in deep water? A digital plan so carefully executed that even the best investigators can't prove what they already know in their hearts? The terrifying reality of this case, and so many like it, is that evil doesn't always come with a weapon, a mask, or a criminal record. Sometimes it comes wearing a smile, holding your hand, booking a vacation in your name. She left believing this was a chance to heal, to reconnect, to begin again. Instead, her name joined a growing list of women who trusted the wrong person who vanished, not in chaos, but in calculated silence. And her story is not just a cautionary tale, it is a plea, a demand that we do better as friends, as families, as a society, to listen more closely to the quiet cries for help before it's too late. For now, her face remains on posters, her name etched into forums, her memory burning in the hearts of everyone who knew her and many who didn't. And her case remains open, not just in the legal system, but in the minds of those who refuse to forget her. Because the only thing worse than losing someone is never knowing where they went.